Welcome back to Matt's Automotive Channel. In this video, we're going to put the valve covers on, the oil pickup tube, and the oil pan. However, the valve covers that I have are quite dirty and some debris in them, so we're going to try to clean all that out before we ever attempt to put it on here. If I put them on as is, there's definitely going to be some debris that gets into the motor here and could potentially wreck it. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here are the valve covers, and they look pretty good at first sight here, at least from the outside. However, we flip these over, and you can see that these are not in such good shape. There's a lot of loose material hanging in here, and these baffles, there could be potentially some stuff hidden under here as well. The other side I don't believe is much better. Well, a little better, but still, there could be some stuff lurking under here. So anyway, we're going to take these baffles off and give this a really good cleaning. These bolts here are a kind of an oddball size. They're 5.5 mm. So let's start by getting those off. Okay, hopefully we can just lift this thing out now. And just as I suspected, pretty dirty under here. We're definitely going to need to clean this up a bit. All right, let's push out these little grommets here. They easily come out just by pushing on them. And then there's this rubber one here. We're going to need to compress that just a little bit to get it out. There we go. Kind of pushed on one side, now I can just pull the rest of it out. Okay, we have this stripped down pretty good, so let's go ahead and try to clean this up a bit. I'm going to spray this with a little bit of degreaser, or Simple Green in this case, and then just kind of give it a light scrubbing, and at least get all the loose stuff off. That's what I'm mostly concerned with. I don't care if it looks real well, but I don't want anything loose in here falling down and getting into the oiling system. Okay, I did take this under the sink and kind of scrub it with some hot water. This is all aluminum, so I don't really have to worry about rusting. This you do. So I just sprayed it real quick with some brake clean. And now I got the other one over here. I just took the screws out, and yeah, that doesn't look a whole lot better. So I'm going to just do the same thing with this side. Okay, I put these under the sink. I hit them with some dishwash soap and some degreaser, Simple Green, and kind of brushed it, cleaned them up, and although they don't look 100% perfect, at least I got all the debris off, so I don't have to worry about anything getting into the oiling system and contaminating it. So let's go ahead and put these baffles back on and get this back onto the motor. All right, let's go and put these plates back in. Okay, plates are screwed back in. Now let's go ahead and get the gaskets put on. Now let's go ahead and put on our spark plug gaskets. Now this is something that should be relatively simple. I just need 16 bolts here to bolt these valve covers down. However, since this motor's been previously taken apart by someone else and basically no labeling of bolts whatsoever, I just have trays here of bolts. I have bags of bolts here. And not to mention, the car in the trunk has a bunch more. So I'm going to have to start sorting through all of this stuff to figure out what bolts are go where, and even if I have the correct bolts. It's just so many parts that were taken apart, not labeled. Here's a bunch more. This is going to be a real challenge, and then the trunk even has some more in there. I was finally able to find and extract and clean up the bolts that we need to put these valve covers on. So let's go ahead and get them on. Okay, before we can put this on, we need to put a little bit of RTV onto the head, in particular where these little wide spots are on the gaskets, because that's going to coincide with where the valve cover, or the chain cover, matches up with the cylinder head. There's a little bit of a gap there, a little inconsistency. I can actually feel that there's a little rise there. So we definitely want to seal that really well. So basically any place there's a mating surface, we want to put RTV. However, on this valve cover, it's just going to be these two spots. Let's just put a little dab of RTV in these two areas. Again, before you do this, make sure that the gasket is well seated into the valve cover. And we'll flip it over and set her straight down. Okay, and I'll show you here. Kind of centered it so these little holes go right over the bolt holes. And then we can put in these little grommets here in each of these holes. All right, let's go and torque these down now. Let's go ahead and install our oil pickup tube, and don't forget the O-ring. It goes over this flanged area, and there's 3 bolts that hold this on. The one that goes into the stud here gets torqued to 18 pound-feet, and these 2 that go into the oil pump get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. And 89 inch-pounds right here. And there we go. Now let's get the oil pan on. All right, folks, I originally wasn't going to show you me putting on the right side valve cover. However, on this particular one, I have a couple of stripped bolts or stripped threads here. And as you can see, these 2 lower ones here, they just keep spinning forever. I never get to the 89 inch-pounds. I think the others are okay. Those all seem to click just fine. So anyway, we're going to have to do a thread repair on these 2 holes. So let me show you how I'm going to do that. Now, of course, before you do any thread repair, you definitely want to make sure that the threads that are stripped are actually in the hole rather than the bolt. If it's just the bolt, then just go ahead and replace that. However, with these, you basically have a steel bolt going to aluminum thread. So more likely than not, it's going to be the hole, the aluminum hole, that is stripped out. Another thing that you want to check before repairing the threads is to look at the bolts. I mean, this one here looks nice and good. However, this one did not, and you can see I took this pick here and then just kind of scraped around the edges of the bolt, and you can see all the metal shavings here that came off. I mean, this used to be the inside of the hole where the threads were, and of course it got stripped out and then they stuck to the bolt. So you definitely want to make sure that the bolt is free of all of that debris before you repair the thread and try to thread that bolt back in. And again, make sure that there's no damage to the bolt itself. Now with the valve cover off, if you just kind of inspect these holes, you can see that there's definitely still some thread in there. However, this guy, not so much, and that one, not so much. In fact, you can take the bolt here and actually just kind of push it down there, which tells you that those threads are just gone. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and repair these threads with a Heli-Coil kit. Before doing the thread repair, I went ahead and turned the motor over onto its side because I'm going to be drilling into these holes here, and I don't want any of the metal to fall into the motor. So by having it here, when the shavings come out, they'll just fall straight down and not into the motor. So that's the only reason I have it at this angle. So the first thing we're going to do is drill this out. These threads here are actually M6 by 1. And so we got a Heli-Coil that's an M6 by 1. But in order for the Heli-Coil to fit in here, we need to drill this out. So we're going to use a 1/4 inch drill bit to drill this out. And then we're going to tap it with an M8 by 1 to thread it so the Heli-Coil has something to thread it into. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's the Heli-Coils that I'm going to use. There's the number if you're interested. And as you can see, that these Heli-Coils, they're not very deep at all. So there really isn't any point in drilling these out any deeper than you need to, because it's only going to, the bolt's only going to grip onto that many threads there. So what I'm going to do is mark this drill bit. So I'm going to go a little deeper in this, but not much. And the reason for that is I need to have it deep enough so I can punch this little tang out at the end once the thread is in there. But there really is no point in going much deeper. So I'm going to take some tape and then measure the end of the drill bit here so I don't go too deep. Okay, that's all the further I went. So basically just the length of the helicoil and just a tad bit more. And I'm measuring from the edge of this drill bit, not the tip, obviously, because it's not going to drill out to the full diameter at the tip. It's where the edge is. So anyway, that's what I'm using for reference. Okay, so here I go. And do this square and as straight as possible. Okay. That should be good. And same thing over here on this one. Now, the reason, as you can see, that holding the engine at this angle is beneficial because now all the metal pieces are down here and not falling into the motor. I don't want to tap any further than I drilled, so I'm going to mark the tap as well. Just place this even with the tape, and then wrap the tape around here. So I'm only going to tap in this far. Okay, now I'm pushing real hard on here and twisting at the same time. Before we insert our helicoil, we're going to want to blow this out with some compressed air. So let's go ahead and thread this in now. And you want to twist it in until it's just flush. And the best little tang off of it. There, it went in. I'm going to try to blow it out now. Oh yeah. I felt it hit me really hard. Let's try one of our bolts and see if it threads in okay. It should thread in just fine. And there we go, our new threads. So, let's do the same thing with this other one and then get our valve cover on. And there's our new thread. Just went ahead and put some ultra black RTV here where the joints are. And I'll just rub that in a little bit to smooth it out. And then we can put our valve cover on with its new gasket. And as you set it on here, just kind of visually inspect to make sure that the gasket's still on there nice and square. Now that all our bolts have been torqued to 89 inch-pounds, let's go ahead and turn our attention to the oil pan. Here's our old oil pan gasket, and I would have reused it except for it's just gunked up with tons of RTV. So I went ahead and purchased a new gasket that we will install. Okay, I got the inside of the oil pan cleaned up pretty well. These little fasteners here, which should be attached to the wiring harness, I went ahead and pulled these out. And also this plug here, I'm going to pull for now. Again, I don't know if we have a wiring harness that's going to fit in there or not, because this is off a different block. So I'm not sure if the 97 Cobra utilizes this. So anyway, I'm going to clean this up and tape it, just so dirt and debris does not get in there in case we do need to use that later. Go ahead and get the oil off so I can put some tape on here and actually have it stick. All right, this will keep the dirt out. There, that should do. The oil pan bolts that I pulled out of here were pretty bad, covered with oil, so I went ahead and soaked them in this Chem Dip overnight. I just cleaned up all the bolts and put them in the respective holes to make sure that we have all of them, and we do. Also inspect the bolts, make sure the threads aren't stripped, and we're also going to have to go over to the block and make sure that none of those threads are stripped as well before we go ahead and try to install the oil pan. Before going any further, I always like to compare the old gasket with the new gasket to make sure that it looks the same and all the holes line up. And as you can see here, this looks pretty good. We got the right one. Before we install the oil pan, we need to get this cover for the rear main seal on because the oil pan bolts into part of this cover. Get this cover cleaned up. There's a lot of RTV on here that needs to come off. We have our plate cleaned up pretty well now, so let's go ahead and install the rear main seal. Before we get started here, I just kind of wanted to show you, this is the new rear main seal. This is the old one. And if you look closely at this one, you'll see that the seal has been compromised here, pretty bad actually. And this thing got loaded up with a bunch of RTV along with I guess this is considered an oil slinger. So anyway, I got as much RTV off of this as possible. This we're going to install from the back side, like so. And we're just going to tap it in until this edge is flush. And the reason being, we'll install this piece later once this is on the motor, and it'll go in like this. And so you don't want to push it in through the front here and have this flush, because then you wouldn't have space for this guy here. So we're going to push it in from the rear. And you'll also notice that this is a very loose fit. It just kind of falls through here. That's because this really seals around the crankshaft, and it'll sit there and actually rotate on the crankshaft through here. And when we install this onto the crankshaft and everything's said and done, this edge right here, this top edge here, will be flush with this surface here. So we're going to install this from the back side and keep everything dry here, and we're just going to lightly tap it in. Now, I don't want to just go to town on this, again, because I don't want to damage this seal at all. So I'm just going to kind of fit it in here loosely a little bit by hand, make sure it's pretty square and even. And then I'm going to take a block of wood and to increase the surface area so I don't put too much pressure on any one part. And then just kind of work my way around, tapping it in like so. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It's flush around here. And you can see a few strips of the seal came apart here, so make sure you get all those off. You definitely don't want that in the motor when you reinstall this. So just clean it up real well. Okay, now you can see that this is kind of set back here a bit, but that's okay because this is going to go on later onto the crankshaft once everything's installed. So let's go ahead and prep the motor and go ahead and install this. One quick other note, there is a spring that seals this. In fact, I'll use this one to kind of show you. It's kind of hidden behind here. In fact, we'll just take it out. But sometimes when you get hammering away on this, it can pop out and get loose. So anyway, just make sure that the spring is there still, and then it's nice and well seated into the seal here. Okay, let's get all the oil off. Where we're going to put the RTV. Okay, that's pretty good. And I'll also do the same thing on the block as well. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and apply the RTV to this surface. Now, you don't need a whole lot. And then as you put the RTV on, go on the inside of the bolt holes, not the outside. I got a thin layer here. I left a little bit off here where the hole is. It goes into the block because I don't want RTV making contact with any of the fluids in the block. So, and I also put a thin layer of oil right around rear main seal. So hopefully this will slide on fairly easy now. The reason I put the RTV on the plate rather than the block is because of my access. Being on the engine stand here, it's very poor access. So I also put some oil onto the crankshaft. Let's just go ahead and try to fit this down here and slide it on. Okay. Now, before I push this all the way on, I want to make sure that the seal didn't get bound up anywhere, and it's nice and square all the way around. Looks good. Let's just go ahead and push this all the way on. Now we'll get our bolts, put them in. There's 6 of them. They're 8 mm, and they'll get torqued down to 89 inch-pounds. Okay, just one more time to make sure that the seal is flush and secure all the way around without binding. I'm using the mirror here, and to see the spots that are tough to see, and looks good all the way around. Okay, now let's just torque them down to 89 inch-pounds. There we go. Okay, now we can push our oil slinger onto the crankshaft. And we'll just push this down until it hits the rear main seal. And that slides on pretty easy. And there we go. Now we can go ahead and put our oil pan on. Okay, now just clean up our surface here. And especially where the RTV is going to go, you want to make sure that's free of oil so the RTV adheres real well to it. But anyway, just clean up the surface. And now we can lay our oil pan gasket on top. Before we put the gasket on, there's several spots where we want to put a little dab of RTV. And that's where, anywhere there's a joint or a mating surface, which is going to be here, 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 and here. All right, so let's put a little bit there just to kind of fill in the crack. So if the gasket isn't capable of sealing it completely, the RTV will. And we'll just kind of spread this in to fill in the little crack there. And this is all the RTV that we used for the oil pan gasket. That should do it. Okay, let's put our oil gasket on here and make sure all the holes line up. All right, now let's lay our oil pan on top of the gasket. Okay, now that we got this down and all the holes aligned, we can put our bolts in. And this is a 3-stage process with a specific torque sequence, and I'll bring that up on the screen here to show you. All right, let's get our bolts in, and we'll just loosely tighten these down for right now. So I'll just get them down to where they make contact with the oil pan, and then we'll start our torque sequence. In the sequence that I just showed you on the screen, we're going to start tightening these bolts to 18 inch-pounds. And then once we get through all of them, we're going to start over that sequence again and go to 15 pound-feet. And then once all that's done, we'll go through the sequence one more time, an additional 60 degrees. All right, 18 inch-pounds is not much, so I'm using this beam style wrench. All right, now break out the other torque wrench and go to 15 pound-feet. And once I have them all torqued down to 15 pound-feet, I like to just go around the clock here just to verify that I didn't miss anything. All right, that looks good, so let's go ahead and do our additional 60 degrees. Okay, now 60 degrees, you could break out your angle wrench. However, each one of these points here from point to point is 60 degrees. So if you just note where one of these points are, put your wrench on it, and then just go to where the other one is, that's your 60 degrees. So that's what I'm gonna do. Now, because I can't go back and check like I did with the torque wrench, I'm gonna mark each one that I do. That way I know that that bolt's complete and not to do it twice accidentally or skip one. So once all these bolts has a mark on it, I know that they're all done. So I'm going to do this is I'm going to go from point to point here on the hex. So this one's pointing straight out, and the other one, of course, is 60 degrees. So I just move my wrench so it lines up with that, and then I'll just pull it till this is straight out where the other point was. So I'm just going to go, and then there's my 60 degrees, and then go ahead and mark it, and just keep going on through the sequence. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna call it quits for this video. And on the next video, we'll go ahead and start installing some other components, probably accessories on the front, at least some of them. Of course, a couple of them, the power steering pump and the AC compressor still in the car. So those will be reserved for when we actually put the motor back in. We'll start to reassemble the intake and also the flywheel and the clutch. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye-bye.